So yesterday I posted a comment to one of my subscribers and just randomly asked him what he would do if he woke up tomorrow and discovered it was 1997. And it looks like a bizarre comment, but let me give some background on it. So, last week, unfortunately, I learned that an old friend of mine died of COVID, and I knew him from a Chinese school that I went to when I was a kid. Uh, I used to go to a Chinese school every Sunday to learn reading and writing Chinese symbols. Now, I hadn't seen him in person since 1997, and that's what inspired me to say, what would you do if you woke up and it was 1997? Because I never imagined anything would happen to him or anybody that I knew at the Chinese school or anything like that. I was expecting this guy to say something in uh, uh, relating to doing something with somebody he knew that is gone now, or maybe not gone now, but has changed since then, right? Maybe he could have approached a girl in a different way, or maybe start leading a healthier lifestyle earlier in his life. I was expecting something like that. He told me he would buy a lot of Bitcoin. Okay, two problems with that. Number one, there's more to life than your finances, right? And number two, going back in time and buying a lot of Bitcoin, especially early on in its life, would probably change the whole trajectory of the whole thing, right? So Bitcoin probably isn't even the best choice for something like that, right? Probably a much better alternative is to buy stocks just before the dot-com bubble, or maybe buy some gold, right? A market big enough to absorb a fortune telling like that, right? And also, don't tell anybody that you know what's going to happen, because if more people jump onto that bandwagon, it might change the trajectory of that whole thing as well, right? Anyway, but even then, that's not my number one thing I would do. Uh, Number one, I've this is the fourth friend that I've lost from COVID-19. I actually have a funny story about that. Early on, very early on in the pandemic, obviously I was in denial. And then just as I started to accept that COVID-19 was actually going to kill people, I lost a friend to COVID-19. The very first friend I lost, he was a very close friend of mine. What had happened was we were in college, and he had helped me compose an email to this girl that I liked, and the girl never responded. But instead he became a close friend. A couple years later, I was at his apartment, and he was showing me a chemical process for refining gold out of computer chips. And I asked him where he got all these chemicals. He had hydrochloric acid, he had nitric acid, and he told me you could buy them at Home Depot. And when he said Home Depot, I kind of gasped. I went, because I had just broken up with a girl who was working part-time at the Home Depot. He knew that, and he went, oh no, just go to Lowe's then, don't go to Home Depot. It gave me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that when he said, just go to Lowe's instead, right? He understood that I had just broken up with... In retrospect, I used to carry a much heavier heart than I should have when I break up. Lately, when I break up with somebody, I just treated like I got my lesson out of them, and it's time to move on to another partner, or maybe to being by myself for some time. I don't know why people carry such a heavy heart for breaking up. You got 4 or 8 billion times that you could break up before you run out of people, depending on your sexuality, and it's just one more that you've gained some lessons from, right? I really don't understand it. I really don't. So the first thing I would do if I went back to 1997 is to understand that breaking up is just a part of life, right? And you gain one more lesson out of the 4 or 8 billion potential lessons that you could have. The second thing I would do is, you see, I'm a solosexual by heart. I feel romance toward myself. But I really didn't understand that until I was in my 20s. If I could go back to 1997 with that knowledge, I would talk much more extensively about it and act more on it, right? If I felt back in 1997, there's a lot of prejudice against people who were solosexual, right? I would speak up a lot more. I would do a lot more hunger strikes like I did this past year. Can you imagine? I'm 10 years old and I'm hunger striking and I'm dying in front of the eyes of everybody else in the classroom or in society. And I'm talking about how being prejudiced because I'm going to a prom dance by myself, and then my bones are sticking out. I can imagine a lot more action would be taken at that point, right?